Snow raged across the valley when a wounded German shepherd was carried into the safety of a small-town police station. Her body was scarred, yet her eyes still burned with a will to protect. On that stormy night, she gave everything she had, fighting through fire and bullets, bringing new life into the world, while danger closed in from every side. Each breath she drew was a vow, each bark a shield against the darkness. But what came after that night would leave everyone speechless. What secret did this brave shepherd carry in her heart? The storm had swallowed Frost Valley whole. Snow fell in sheets thick and blinding, carried sideways by a wind that howled through the mountains like a beast looking for prey. The two-lane back road that wound through the timberline was nearly invisible, buried under drifting snow that the plows had long given up on clearing. Patrol shifts in a storm like this were usually empty of action. Just miles of frozen silence headlights cutting a narrow tunnel of light through the white. But Deputy Ethan Ward had learned never to trust silence. He leaned forward in the cab of his patrol truck, gloved hands tight around the wheel. At 35, Ethan carried himself like a man who had lived two different lives, the military years that left scars on his mind, and the quieter years after, when he returned home to Frost Valley to wear the sheriff's badge. His dark winter jacket bore the silver star of the county stitched to his chest, and his boots were caked with salt and ice from a dozen storms. The heater hummed, but it barely touched the chill creeping into the cab. Ethan kept the window cracked just an inch. He had done this since his service days, a habit he never broke, keeping the sound of the outside world alive in his ears. Out here, a single change in the rhythm of the night could mean trouble. Tonight, something in his gut told him trouble was waiting. The beam of his headlights swept across skeletal pines and sagging wire fences buried in snow. As the truck rounded a blind curve, a flicker of motion broke the monotony. At first, Ethan thought it was a deer, the way it staggered against the storm. He slowed, squinting through the snow-smeared windshield. Then he heard it, the sound that tightened every muscle in his body. A cry. It was muffled by the storm, but high-pitched, sharp with pain. Not a human voice, an animal's. Ethan rolled the truck to a stop, shifting it into park. The wipers screeched against the glass as snow built up faster than they could clear. He pushed the door open, and the storm rushed inside, slapping his face with needles of ice. He flipped on the high beams, and there it was. In the glow of his headlights, the scene unfolded like a nightmare carved into the snow. Beside a rusted fence at the edge of an abandoned lumber yard, a tall man stood over a chained German shepherd. The dog's coat was soaked with ice and mud, her belly swollen with pregnancy, her legs trembling as she tried to stay upright. Each time she faltered, the man struck her again, kicking with steel-toed boots or swinging the butt of a sawed-off rifle like a club. Snow flew up with each blow, stained red where her paws dragged through it. "My cargo doesn't run," the man's snarled voice shredded by rage. Ethan's blood surged hot. He recognized the figure instantly. Victor Hale, the Snake. Locals gave him that name because of the rattlesnake tattoo that climbed his neck, and because, like a snake, he always managed to slither out of charges in court. Once a trucker now, the ruthless enforcer for Dominic Vance, the crime boss, whose shadow had stretched over Montana's back roads. Victor was known for cruelty. But this was beyond anything Ethan had expected. Ethan's training took over before thought could catch up. He drew his service pistol in a smooth motion, stepping into the headlights so Victor could see the badge glint on his chest. "Sheriff's Department." Ethan's voice cracked across the clearing. "Drop the weapon." Victor spun toward him, face pale and the light eyes wild and sleepless. For a heartbeat, the two men locked eyes, predator and lawman measuring each other. Victor spat into the snow and cursed. Then, without hesitation, he bolted toward the tree line, disappearing into the storm. "Stop hands where I can see them," Ethan shouted. But Victor was already gone, swallowed by the pines and the blizzard. Ethan lowered his aim, heart pounding. He turned to the dog. The German Shepherd was chained tight to the fence post. The padlock was rusted, the chain thick. She tried to lift her head, but it sagged again. Her eyes flicked toward him wide, exhausted, still fighting to stay open. Her belly trembled under the weight of unborn puppies. "Hey, girl," Ethan said softly, voice shifting from command to comfort. "Hang on, I've got you." He holstered his pistol and pulled a multi-tool from his belt. Kneeling in the snow, he worked at the chain. His gloves slipped the wind, biting his fingers, but he kept at it until the metal snapped loose. The dog stumbled forward and collapsed against his leg. Ethan slipped his arms under her body. Her ribs trembled under his grip, her belly heavy and taut. She was warm, even in the storm heat radiating through his jacket. He could feel her shallow breaths against his chest. "You're safe now," he whispered, lifting her carefully. The storm howled, but Ethan's focus narrowed to the weight in his arms and the faint thud of her heart. He turned toward his patrol truck boots, punching into snowdrifts. The headlights caught something glinting at the base of the fence post. He paused, crouched carefully with the dog still in his arms. A burner phone. Its cracked screen glowed a message blinking across it. The delivery failed. "Get it back now." Below it, a file labeled K9 Inventory. Ethan's jaw tightened. He didn't need to guess who DV was. Dominic Vance. The rumors about his trafficking ring drugs, weapons, animals had just come alive in the snow at Ethan's feet. The German Shepherd stirred weakly in his arms. Ethan glanced at her, then back at the phone. This wasn't just cruelty. This was evidence. This was the first real crack in Vance's empire. He carried the dog back to the truck, opening the rear door with his elbow. He laid her gently across the seat, covering her with his spare-duty jacket. She whimpered once, then curled into herself, shivering. Ethan climbed into the driver's seat, gripping the wheel tight. The storm thickened, swallowing the road behind him. "This ends tonight," he muttered. He keyed the radio. "Dispatch, this is Deputy Ward. I need animal control and backup at the old lumber yard on Route 14. Suspect fled on foot. I'm transporting an injured animal." Static hissed back. Then the dispatcher's voice crackled faintly. But Ethan hardly heard it. His eyes flicked to the rearview mirror where the German Shepherd's amber eyes glowed faintly in the dark, watching him. "Don't worry," he said softly, voice steady, even as the storm raged around him. "Nobody's going to hurt you again." The dog's eyes fluttered, then closed. Her breathing steadied under the jacket. For the first time in hours, Ethan let himself breathe too. But deep down, he knew this was only the beginning. The snow kept falling, and somewhere in those mountains, Victor Hale was already planning his next move. The storm still raged as Ethan drove into town. His patrol truck crawled down the narrow road, wipers screeching, tires crunching over ice. The snow fell so thick, it looked like the world was dissolving into white. The German Shepherd lay curled in the back seat, covered in his duty jacket. Every few minutes, Ethan glanced at her in the mirror. Her chest rose and fell in shallow rhythm. Sometimes her paws twitched like she was fighting battles in her dreams. The heater blasted, but she still shivered. Ethan pressed the gas harder. He had one destination in mind, the only place open in Frost Valley that could give her a chance. The squat brick building stood at the edge of town, its green sign swinging wildly in the Wind Valley Animal Care. A dim yellow light glowed from the windows. Relief tugged at Ethan's chest. At least someone was here. He parked close, grabbed his jacket, and opened the back door. "All right, girl," he whispered. "Hang in there." He slid his arms under her again. She was lighter than he expected, her body all bones beneath the heavy belly. She whimpered once as he lifted her, her head pressing weakly against his chest. The door chimed as he shouldered it open. warmth spilled out smelling of antiseptic and cedar bedding. A young woman stepped from the back room, drying her hands on a towel. She wore dark blue scrubs under a fleece vest embroidered with the clinic's name. Her hair was tied back in a messy bun, strands of auburn escaping around her face. Her eyes, pale green, steady, took in the sight instantly. "Put her on the table," she said, no hesitation. Ethan laid the dog gently onto the stainless steel exam table. The woman tugged on gloves and began moving her hands over the shepherd's flank, murmuring softly. The dog flinched, but didn't snap, tail tucked so tight it nearly disappeared. "She's pregnant," the woman said after a quick check. "Late term and badly dehydrated." She frowned, brushing fur away from the dog's neck. "And there's something here." Ethan stepped closer. "What is it? A chip?" The woman retrieved a handheld scanner from the counter. She passed it over the ridge beneath the dog's skin. A sharp beep echoed. Numbers appeared on the display. Her brows drew together. "This isn't a pet registry," she said slowly. "This is an old law enforcement code. She was part of a K-9 program that shut down 6 months ago. They reported several dogs missing." Ethan's jaw tightened. He pulled the burner phone from his pocket screen, still glowing faintly. She was chained at the old lumber yard. Guy beating her ran off, left this behind. The woman took the phone, scanning the screen quickly. Delivery failed. K-9 inventory. She exhaled sharply. "This isn't just abuse. This is organized." "Name's Deputy Ethan Ward," he said, straightening. She gave a short nod. "Dr. Clara Hayes." Clara leaned closer to the dog, eyes narrowing as her fingers traced along a faint scar in the ear. "Surgical line. She's been through training, maybe tracking implants." She drew blood into a vial. The fluid swirled dark red, but as she tilted it toward the light, something faintly shimmered at the bottom. Her face hardened. "There's residue here. Narcotics." Ethan's pulse kicked. "You're saying she was carrying drugs?" "Not inside," Clara said, quickly shaking her head. "But on her fur, in her wounds, maybe in collars or harnesses, she's been in direct contact. Enough to test positive." Her voice tightened. "And she's pregnant. That makes it worse." The German shepherd stirred, letting out a low moan. Ethan placed a hand gently on her head. "She's been trained," he murmured. "Look how she watches us. She wants to trust, but she's waiting for the next blow." Clara hooked up a saline drip, sliding the needle carefully into the dog's foreleg. The dog trembled, then eased as fluid flowed into her veins. Clara's tone softened. "You did the right thing bringing her in. Another hour outside and she could have lost the litter or her life." Ethan nodded, though his mind raced. Victor Hale. Dominic Vance. The K-9 inventory. This wasn't random. This was a pipeline. Clara covered the dog with a thermal blanket, adjusting the IV. "She'll need rest. My clinic's secure, but if someone beat her in public, they'll come looking." Ethan's gaze swept the windows where snow pressed against the glass. "Then I'll stay." He pulled a chair into the corner, setting his pistol on his lap under his jacket. "At least until she stabilizes." Clara didn't argue. She prepared a second IV bag, her hand steady. The storm rattled the windows. For a moment, the three of them sat in silence, the deputy, the vet, and the wounded dog, each carrying more weight than they let on. Hours passed. The storm outside softened into steady flakes, but the clinic stayed lit warm against the night. Ethan sat half dozing in the chair, every muscle still tight. Clara moved quietly, checking the dog's pulse, running tests, scribbling notes. At last she pulled the scanner again, reading the chip number one more time. She handed Ethan a slip of paper. "This ID matches one of the missing K-9 reports. Her handler file might still be in the system. If you can access it, we'll know who trained her." Ethan took the paper, tucking it into his pocket. His eyes drifted to the dog. She needs a name. Clara glanced up, surprised. What did you have in mind? Something soft, Ethan said. He thought for a moment, then whispered Maya. The shepherd stirred, lifting her head faintly at the sound, as though recognizing it. Her eyes fluttered closed again, but her breathing steadied. Clara smiled faintly. Maya. It fits. Ethan leaned back, exhaustion pressing at him. We'll get them, he muttered. Every last one. Maya blinked once, slow, a gesture of fragile trust. And as the storm beat harder against the windows, Ethan knew the fight had only just begun. The storm finally broke by morning, leaving Frost Valley buried beneath white drifts that reached the windowsills. The main road into town was quiet, only the slow scrape of a snowplow echoing now and then, its orange light glowing faintly in the dawn. Inside the small police station, Ethan Ward pushed open the rear door with his shoulder, carrying Maya wrapped in a police-issued thermal blanket. She was heavier today, or maybe his body just ached from carrying too much weight the night before. The German shepherd lifted her head slightly, her amber eyes flicking to every corner as they entered the dim hallway. The station was modest, with 3 offices, a dispatch room, a lockup for human detainees, and tucked behind a steel door, a small holding area designed for strays. It wasn't much, but it was safer than leaving her anywhere else. Ethan placed her gently into a large kennel lined with fleece. She hesitated, sniffed the corners, then stepped inside and curled up. For a moment, her body tensed at the sight of the bars, a memory sparking in her eyes. But when Ethan crouched to her level and whispered, "It's just for now, girl. You're safe?" She relaxed, resting her head on the mat. Ethan carried a small evidence bag back to his desk and sat heavily in his chair. Inside the bag was Victor Hale's burner phone. He scrolled through the messages, his breath steady but tight. There were several texts, most of them from a contact labeled DV. One caught his eye, inventory list updated. Get the cargo moved by Friday. Below it was a file labeled simply Inventory. Ethan tapped it open. Rows of coded numbers filled the screen. His stomach dropped. These codes looked like the format of the microchip ID Clara had scanned from Maya. He highlighted a dozen, then reached into his drawer for a folder he had kept months ago, the missing K9 reports. When he cross-checked, the match was almost perfect. This wasn't a stray case. This was a pipeline. A knock came at the open doorway. Officer Leo Ramirez stepped in, still wearing his patrol jacket stiff with new creases. At 27, he had the eager posture of someone still proving himself. "Morning, Deputy," he said, clipboard in hand. "Dispatch asked me to log the animal you brought in last night. Want me to add her to the file?" Ethan nodded. Maya. Female German shepherd. Late pregnancy. Victim of abuse tied to Victor Hale. Leo scribbled quickly, then looked up, eyes widening when he saw the dog in the kennel. "She's huge. Poor thing." Ethan's face remained hard. "Keep it off the radio. This is bigger than cruelty charges." Leo nodded, catching the tone, and didn't push further. The 2 men turned to the grainy security monitor mounted on the wall. 4 camera feeds showed the station perimeter. Leo pointed at one. Motion alarm tripped twice overnight. Could have been deer, but... Ethan leaned forward. The footage rewound. For a brief moment, a silhouette appeared near the back fence. A hooded figure lingered before slipping out of view. Ethan's stomach tightened. "Not deer," he murmured. He ordered Leo to save the footage to the cloud and patrol the alley every hour. The younger officer nodded, nerves flickering in his eyes. Ethan rubbed his temples. On his desk lay Maya's case file, the microchip number, Clara's preliminary blood results, and the burner phone. He scrolled further down the device and froze at a photo, a dim warehouse lined with cages. Dogs of different breeds stared through bars, their coats patchy, some with shaved spots where IVs had been inserted. Another photo showed a crude map with pins along the Canadian border. Ethan printed the images and pinned them above his desk. The map began to form a pattern. A bark sounded from the kennel. Ethan walked over, crouching down again. Maya stood, tense ears, pricked eyes fixed on the far door as if she sensed something unseen. A low growl rumbled in her throat, not fear, but warning. Ethan whispered, "You hear it too." He turned off the overhead light and cracked the blinds, peering outside. Snow swirled the alley empty, but the hair on his neck stayed raised. He opened his encrypted laptop and drafted a quick message to someone he trusted. Agent Sylvia Grant, a veteran with the Montana Division of Criminal Investigation. She had helped him once before on a weapons case, a tall woman with a sharp eye for detail, and the kind of authority that cut through noise. Ethan attached the inventory file and wrote, "Need confirmation on missing canines. Keep off main channels." He hit send. The hum of the computer blended with the faint sound of Maya's breathing. He crouched again, sliding a water dish under the kennel gate. She sniffed, then lapped slowly, her bandaged leg trembling but steady. Ethan reached through the bars, his hand brushing her fur. "You're safe here," he whispered. The intercom buzzed. "Ward, it's Ramirez. Dr. Clara Hayes is here. Says she's got lab results." Ethan buzzed her in. Minutes later, Clara stepped through the door, snow clinging to her boots. A messenger bag slung over her shoulder. She looked tired, eyes shadowed, but her voice was brisk. "How's she holding up?" Ethan glanced at Maya. Alert. Still keyed up. Clara set her bag down, pulling out papers and a flash drive. Blood panels confirmed narcotics residue. Multiple markers. Whoever handled her was using her as a moving test subject. Her gaze drifted to the kennel, softening. But she's calmer than last night. Ethan leaned back, jaw tight. Security cameras caught someone outside. Could have been Hale checking if we still have her. Clara's brow furrowed. They won't stop. Not if she's evidence. Ethan nodded grimly. We'll move her to a safer location. But first I need every dog on that list cross-checked. He slid the printed photo of the cages toward Clara. Recognize anything? Clara stared at the background, then pressed her lips thin. That's the old shipping warehouse north of town. Closed 5 years ago. I did a rescue call there once. Ethan jotted notes. Good, that narrows it down. Another bark cut through the room, sharp and insistent. Ethan rose, peering through the side window. A dark sedan rolled slowly down the snow-packed street, windows tinted, no plates. His hand hovered near his holster, memorizing the shape of the car before it vanished. Clara's hand brushed the kennel bars, fingertips sliding across Maya's fur. She's been through hell, she whispered. But she's still trying to protect someone. Ethan's eyes softened. That's why I gave her a name. He pulled a heavy blanket over the top of the kennel to dim the light. She needs to feel hidden. Clara nodded. She's not just evidence, Ethan. She's a survivor. The clock ticked past noon. The storm outside had quieted into soft flakes, but the tension inside the station thickened. Ethan placed the burner phone into a new evidence bag, locked it in his desk drawer, and returned to the corkboard. Maps, photos, inventory codes. They all pointed to something bigger than anyone wanted to admit. He glanced one last time at Maya, her amber eyes glowing faintly under the blanket. Hang in there, girl, he murmured. We're going to end this. The snow had quieted outside, but the police station in Frost Valley felt colder than ever. The walls carried the smell of damp boots, stale coffee, and the faint metallic tang of old heating pipes. Ethan Ward rubbed his eyes as he leaned over the evidence table. The burner phone sat in front of him, sealed inside a clear bag, its screen still glowing faintly when charged. On the board above his desk, the list of numbers matched with missing K9 files glared back at him like ghosts refusing to stay buried. Maya shifted in her kennel near the wall. Her breathing had steadied since the night Ethan pulled her from the lumber yard, but her body was still tense. Every noise drew her eyes. Every door creak made her ears snap upright. Ethan rose, crouched beside the kennel, and slid a water dish under the bars. "You're safe here," he murmured. She lapped once, her eyes never leaving his face. Trust didn't come easy anymore, not for her. Officer Leo Ramirez came in, his cheeks red from the cold. Perimeters clear, he reported, setting his gloves on the desk. No tracks around the back alley since last night. Just snowdrift. Ethan nodded. "Good. Keep it tight. Victor Hale won't let this go." Leo glanced at the corkboard eyes lingering on the photos of cages and crates. "You really think they're using canines for smuggling?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "I don't think." "I know." He tapped the burner phone. "And Maya here is proof." The two men exchanged a look, unspoken worry between them. Outside, the wind moaned against the siding. That night, the station grew still. Dispatch had gone home, leaving just Ethan, Leo, and Sergeant Grady dozing in his office chair. Clara Hayes had stopped by earlier to check on Maya, bringing supplies and fresh bandages, but she had returned to her clinic for the night. Ethan settled into the duty desk, paperwork spread before him, but his eyes kept drifting to the flicker of the security monitors. 4 grainy black and white feeds watched the perimeter. Nothing but snow drifted across them. Then Maya stirred. Her head shot up, ears rigid, a growl low in her throat. Her amber eyes locked on the side door. Ethan froze. He knew that sound instinct, not nerves. He reached for his pistol, rising from his chair without a word. The monitor flickered. For 1 second, the side camera caught movement, a figure in a hood slipping past the edge of the frame. Then the feed fuzzed to static. Leo Ethan hissed. "Side door. Now." The younger officer sprang up, grabbing his flashlight. They moved together, boots silent on the old floor. The hallway stretched long, and dim light bulbs humming faintly overhead. At the end, the metal side door rattled once, then stilled. Ethan lifted a hand, signaling stop. The air felt too thick, too quiet. He pressed his shoulder to the wall, weapon raised. With his other hand, he twisted the knob and shoved the door wide. The alley outside was empty. Snow swirled in weak gusts. No footprints, no shadow. Just silence. Leo frowned, sweeping his light across the ground. Could have been the wind. A crash echoed from the main room. They spun back, sprinting down the hallway. Ethan's boots slammed the floor as he burst into the office. The kennel was rocking. Maya barked furiously, teeth flashing at the figure crouched by the evidence desk. Victor Hale. The rattlesnake tattoo curled along his neck, his hood shoved back, eyes wild and sharp. In his hands, he clutched the drawer Ethan had locked, evidence bags spilling from it. The burner phone dangled from his grip. "Drop it!" Ethan roared. Gun leveled. Victor sneered, backing toward the rear exit. "This ain't yours, deputy. Maya is," Ethan shot back. The dog's barking filled the station, echoing off the walls. Her growl was deeper now, vibrating with fury. Victor's eyes flicked to her, then back to Ethan. She was cargo. Nothing more. Leo moved to flank him, pistol trembling in his hands. "Drop it, Hale. You're surrounded." Victor laughed, the sound sharp and mean. Then he hurled the evidence drawer at Leo and bolted for the exit. Papers flew, bags scattered. Maya slammed against the kennel bars, snarling. Ethan fired once, the bullet sparking off the steel frame inches from Victor's arm, but the man crashed through the door and vanished into the night. "Go!" Ethan shouted. Leo sprinted after him, flashlight beam cutting across the snow. Ethan hesitated, then turned back to the desk. The drawer was overturned, but one small SD card had fallen under the leg of the chair. He snatched it up, tucking it into his pocket. Maya still barked, chest-heaving eyes fixed on the door Victor had escaped through. Ethan crouched to her level voice steady. "Easy, girl. We'll get him. I promise." Leo stumbled back a few minutes later, breath white in the cold. He's gone. Tracks disappeared at the fence line. Like he knew the alleys better than us. Ethan holstered his weapon, his shoulders tense. Of course he does. He's been here before. He pulled out the SD card, holding it up to the light. But he left us something. When the chaos settled, the three men sat at the duty desk, the glow of the computer screen lighting their faces. The SD card Word files loading. At first just blank directories. Then a folder appeared, training footage. Ethan clicked. Video grain filled the screen. Dogs, dozens of them, stood in rows of cages. Men in masks moved between them, shouting commands, whipping leashes. One dog was fitted with a harness, a small pouch strapped tight. Another video showed Victor himself forcing a shepherd through a dark corridor lined with crates. Behind him a voice boomed low and commanding. Dominic Vance. Ethan's gut clenched. The crime boss's face never appeared, but his voice carried enough weight to freeze the room. Orders barked threats, delivered promises of money, whispered. These weren't street thugs. This was an operation. Leo swallowed hard. This is enough to tie him, right? Not yet, Ethan said, though his eyes never left the screen. But it's close. Maya lay back down, exhausted from barking, but her gaze stayed sharp. Ethan reached through the kennel, brushing her fur. You did good tonight. She leaned into his hand just for a moment. The station was quiet again, but the walls seemed thinner, the shadows deeper. Victor had been inside their stronghold, a phantom slipping past locks and cameras. He hadn't come for blood this time. He'd come for the dog in the files. Frost Valley looked calmer on the surface, but beneath the snow the ground felt ready to crack. Inside the police station, the air was thick with the smell of burnt coffee and damp wool. Ethan Ward sat at his desk, the corkboard above him, crowded with photographs, maps, and printouts. Maya rested in the kennel near the wall, her head on her paws, but her amber eyes never stopped watching. Every time the door creaked or the wind rattled the glass, her ears twitched. Ethan's phone buzzed. It was a secure line. He answered with a low, steady voice. Ward. The voice on the other end carried the clipped tones of someone used to command. Deputy, this is Agent Sylvia Grant. I received your files. The inventory list, the chip number, the photos, you were right. They match reports of missing K9s from agencies all across the state. Not just one or two. Dozens. Ethan rubbed his temple. So it's not just local. No, Sylvia said. It's a network, and there's more. 3 months ago, one of our undercover agents went missing while tracking Dominic Vance's warehouses along the northern line. Her name is Laura Chen. 39 investigator out of Seattle. Last seen near a decommissioned rail yard, 15 miles north of you. We think she stumbled onto the same operation you've just touched. The words sank heavy. Ethan stared at the photo pinned on his board of cages stacked 3 high. The dogs inside staring hollow-eyed. And you think Vance has her? There was silence on the line, then Sylvia answered softly. If he does, she won't be safe. But if she's alive, she might know where the rest of the dogs are kept. When the call ended, Ethan leaned back in his chair, the room suddenly too small. He printed Laura's file from the email Sylvia had sent. The photo showed a woman with shoulder-length black hair, olive skin, and the calm eyes of someone who had spent years living undercover. She wore a parka, jeans, and a badge clipped to her belt. Ethan pinned it under the heading, Missing. Clara Hayes entered a moment later, laptop bag slung over her shoulder. Snow clung to her boots. "You look like you've been staring at that board for hours," she said. "I have," Ethan admitted. He gestured toward the new photo. Laura Chen, undercover agent. Disappeared 3 months ago. She was working the same case. Clara's eyes widened. 3 months, and no word? Ethan shook his head. If Vance has her, she might be the only one who knows the location of his main warehouse. Clara set her bag on the desk, flipping it open. "Then we have to find overlap. Let's cross-reference the coordinates from the SD card with her last cell ping." She pulled up a satellite map, her fingers moving quickly across the keys. The glow of the screen reflected in her green eyes. Ethan watched her work, the quiet hum of the computer filling the room. For a moment he felt the weight of how far out of their depth they both were. A small-town deputy and a vet tangled in something that reached across state lines. Still, Clara's focus was unwavering. She traced paths, marked points, and then froze. "Here." She tapped the screen. A red circle pulsed around an abandoned freight yard north of town. "This is where her phone last pinged. And look at this graffiti in the background of Vance's training videos." She enlarged a still image from the SD card. The same faded symbols scrawled across rusted steel walls. "It's the same place." Ethan exhaled slowly. "That's our lead." The door opened then, and Sergeant Paul Grady stepped in. A broad man in his mid-50s with a lined face and a steel-gray mustache, Grady had worked rural law enforcement long enough to know trouble when he saw it. His boots crunched against the tile as he stopped beside the desk. "Dispatch says you've been keeping something off the books." Ethan met his eyes. He hesitated, then gestured toward the board. "Dominic Vance. He's using stolen K9s for smuggling. Maya's one of them. And now we've got a missing agent tied to the same trail." Grady studied the photos, the coded lists, the picture of Maya lying curled in the kennel. "That's a hell of a thing," he muttered. "You need backup, yes?" Ethan said simply. Grady tipped his hat back. "Then you've got it. I'll lock down the station tonight. Nobody gets in or out without my say." He left to check the perimeter, his heavy footsteps echoing down the hall. Clara leaned back in her chair. "If Vance sent Victor Hale into your station once, he'll escalate." "He's desperate." Ethan nodded. He picked up a fresh folder, started writing the discovery into a report, but his mind kept circling back to Laura Chen's face. If she was still alive, time was running out. Later that evening, the security monitors showed nothing but falling snow drifting like static across the screens. Inside the office hummed with quiet, only the sound of Clara's typing and Maya's slow breathing. Ethan crouched by the kennel, sliding his hand against the bars. Maya's warm breath touched his fingers. "We'll make them pay," he whispered. She blinked once, slow and deliberate her way of answering. Clara looked up from her laptop. "They're connected," she said softly, glancing at the board. "The missing agent, the K9s, Maya. We just have to prove it." Ethan straightened his silhouette outlined by the glow of the monitors. Outside, the streetlights glowed weakly through the falling snow. Somewhere beyond the storm, Dominic Vance was tightening his grip. But here in this small station, the threads of his empire were finally unraveling. The night stretched on heavy and tense, but hope flickered in the quiet. The snow had settled into a hard crust by the time Ethan Ward rolled the patrol truck down the back road toward the abandoned freight yard. The windshield rattled as the tires hit frozen ruts, and every bump jarred the coffee in his stomach. Maya sat in the back seat, awake and restless, her amber eyes locked on the horizon, as if she already knew where they were going. She shifted now and then, belly heavy, her breath fogging the glass. Ethan glanced at her in the mirror. "Stay sharp, girl. This might get ugly." Beside him, Sergeant Grady checked the magazine on his rifle. His lined face was grim, jaw tight beneath his gray mustache. Sylvia Grant says we hit hard and fast. No mistakes. Clara Hayes sat between them, hands folded around a tablet displaying satellite maps of the yard. She wasn't supposed to come, but she had insisted. If Maya reacts, I'll know what it means. And if there are other dogs in there, they'll need someone ready. Ethan had argued, but finally gave in. She wasn't reckless. She was prepared. Behind them, a convoy of 2 state cruisers followed. Agent Sylvia Grant led from her own SUV, her tall frame visible through the glass head bent toward her radio. Her voice crackled in Ethan's earpiece. We approach silent. No sirens. We breach the north gate in 5. Watch for Victor Hale. He won't run twice. The freight yard appeared ahead through the drifting snow. Rows of rusted boxcars sat silent on dead tracks. The main warehouse loomed like a black tooth against the pale sky, its windows' shattered roof caved in places. Graffiti covered the walls, including the same faded symbols Clara had matched to the photos. The whole place smelled of rot and old oil, even from here. The vehicles rolled to a stop. Doors opened. Men and women in dark uniforms fanned out, weapons drawn. Their breath steamed in the cold. Ethan clipped a flashlight to his vest and looked once more at Maya. You stay close, he whispered. He opened the back door. She jumped down, landing steady, despite her bulk tail. Stiff nose to the air. She caught a scent immediately, ears pricking, muscles taut. Contact, Ethan said into the radio. She's got something. The team moved toward the warehouse. Snow crunched under boots, the sound too loud in the silence. When they reached the steel door, Agent Grant motioned for the breacher. The ram hit the lock with a sharp crack. The door swung wide. Darkness rushed out at them, thick and damp. Ethan swept his flashlight. Dust floated like ash. Crates lined the walls, some marked with foreign shipping codes. At first it looked empty. Then Maya stiffened a growl, rising deep in her chest. The trap sprung, a hiss filled the room. Gray smoke poured down from vents hidden in the rafters. It billowed thick, acrid, stinging eyes and throats. Gas, someone shouted. Masks went up, but visibility collapsed instantly. Shadows moved inside the haze. Shouts echoed, then the sharp crack of gunfire. Ethan grabbed Clara, pulling her behind a crate. Stay down. He pressed his mask over her face before snapping his own into place. Through the blur, he saw figures rushing, men in dark coats, rifles flashing. Muzzle flares lit the smoke like lightning. Maya barked once, sharp and loud, her form a dark streak vanishing into the haze. Ethan's heart lurched. Maya. He followed, rifle raised. Shapes lunged from the smoke. He fired twice, the recoil jolting his shoulder. A man dropped, weapon clattering. Another figure rushed, but Grady's shot cut him down. Agent Grant's voice barked over the radio. Secure evidence, take them alive if you can. But the warehouse itself was already burning. The smoke wasn't just a cover. It was sabotage. Fire climbed the crates' orange tongues, licking higher, consuming paperwork ledgers, any trace of the operation. Through the haze, Ethan spotted cages, rows of them stacked and rattling with terrified movement. Dogs barked and whined, their outlines shifting in the red glow. He surged forward, coughing into his mask. A man appeared, swinging a crowbar, but Maya launched from the side. Her teeth sank into his arm, dragging him down. Ethan kicked the crowbar away and fired once into the floor beside him. The man froze, pinned beneath snarling jaws. Ethan ripped open the first cage. A thin husky bolted out, stumbling on weak legs. He yanked the next door, then the next, until dogs swarmed around him, their barks echoing like thunder in the smoke. Clara appeared, sleeve pulled over her mouth, guiding the animals toward the door. This way, she shouted. A deafening crack tore the air as part of the roof collapsed. Sparks rained down. The fire spread faster. Ethan grabbed Maya's harness. Her muzzle was smeared with blood, but her eyes were fierce. Come on, girl. We're not dying here." They pushed through the chaos, weaving between gunfire and falling debris. Grady appeared out of the smoke, dragging a wounded officer. "Move," he barked. Ethan and Clara flanked him, Maya at their side, guiding the rescued dogs out into the snow. The night air hit like ice when they burst from the warehouse. Dogs scattered into the yard, tails tucked but alive. Clara bent over, coughing, her cheeks streaked with soot. Ethan scanned the shadows. "Victor," he demanded. Grant strode up, her mask hanging at her neck, eyes blazing. "Gone. He was here, I'm sure of it, but he slipped the line. And Dominic's trail just went up in flames." She gestured toward the warehouse now, an inferno. "We lost most of the evidence." Ethan clenched his fists. The phone, the photos, the cages, they had all pointed here. And now, with the fire eating everything, the case was slipping through their fingers. Maya pressed against his leg, panting, ears flicking toward the trees. He crouched, rubbing her head. "You saved me again," he whispered. Grant called the retreat. Officers loaded the rescued dogs into transport vans. Medics worked over the wounded. The glow of the fire lit the sky, a signal flare announcing their failure as much as their survival. When it was over, Ethan stood in the snow, watching the warehouse collapse into itself. Sparks rose, carried off by the wind. Clara came to his side, her voice hoarse. "We saved some. That matters. It's not enough," Ethan said, eyes hard. "We need Vance, and we need Victor." Behind them, Maya let out a low growl, her gaze still fixed on the dark tree line. Somewhere out there, Victor Hale was already planning his next strike. The police station had always felt like a safe shell, a place where the worst of Frost Valley was kept at bay. But on that night, the walls trembled with the weight of what was coming. Snow beat against the windows like fists, and the cold seeped through every crack. Ethan Ward stood in the main office, rifle slung across his chest, eyes flicking between the security monitors and the kennel in the corner. Maya paced restlessly inside, her swollen belly dragging low. Every breath came harder, faster. Clara Hayes knelt at the kennel door, stethoscope hanging from her neck, her hands calm, though her face was tight with worry. "It's starting," she said softly. "Her labor's begun." Ethan's chest tightened. Now, in the middle of this, Clara looked up at him, her green eyes firm. "There's no scheduling it, Ethan. She's in pain. She's going to need help." Maya let out a low whine, pawing at the blanket beneath her. Her body trembled as contractions rippled through her frame. She shifted, turned, then collapsed onto her side, panting hard. Sergeant Grady pushed open the office door, his heavy boots echoing. Perimeter alarms just tripped. South Alley. Ethan's head snapped toward the monitors. Grainy figures moved in the snow shadows, slipping between fences. His stomach dropped. "They're here." Grady's hand rested on his shotgun. Then they picked the wrong night. Maya whimpered, louder claws scraping the kennel floor. Clara stroked her head, murmuring steady words. "Easy, girl. Focus on me. You're strong. You can do this." The first gunshot shattered the night. Glass burst from a side window, spraying the floor. Leo Ramirez shouted from the hallway, his pistol already drawn. "Contact south side." Ethan slammed the emergency shutters, steel panels dropping over the windows. The station plunged into dim yellow light, humming with the sound of metal locking into place. "Positions," he barked. "We hold this line." Gunfire rattled the outer walls. The gang had come, heavy rifles, shotguns, shouting voices echoing through the storm. Through the din, Ethan heard a name barked. "Get the dog! Bring the bitch out!" Clara flinched, pressing closer to Maya. The shepherd bared her teeth, a snarl ripping from her throat, even as her body convulsed with another contraction. Ethan crouched by the kennel. "Listen to me, Maya. You fight, but you don't fight alone. We're with you." He looked at Clara. "Do what you have to. I'll hold them off. Grady and Leo returned fire from the front entrance, their muzzles flashing in the gloom. The sharp crack of bullets striking steel filled the air. Smoke drifted inside, acrid and bitter. Maya cried out, her body tightening. Then beneath the chaos, a small sound broke through a thin, fragile squeak. Clara's face lit with relief. The first pup's here. She moved quickly, clearing the newborn, rubbing it with a clean towel until its cries grew louder. She placed the tiny, trembling body near Maya's muzzle. The mother licked it, fiercely protective, even in her exhaustion. Ethan's chest swelled, but the moment was cut short by a grenade clattering across the floor. "Smoke," Leo shouted, kicking it back toward the doorway. White haze exploded, filling the station with choking clouds. Shadows moved within it. Victor Hale's voice cut through, sharp and cruel. "Ward, hand over the dog, and this ends clean. Refuse, and you all burn." Ethan gritted his teeth. "You want her, Hale? You'll have to walk over me." He fired into the smoke, a muzzle flash answering from the other side. Maya howled, a raw, defiant sound that rose above the storm of gunfire. Her body shuddered, another contraction hitting hard. Clara worked fast, coaxing the second puppy into the world. Two tiny cries pierced the haze. "Too alive," she shouted over the gunfire. "She's fighting for them." Bullets chewed into the walls. Grady cursed, blood streaking his sleeve where a round grazed him. He fired back, rage in his eyes. "They won't take this place." Ethan moved to cover the rear hall, heart hammering. Through the smoke, a figure lunged, Victor himself, knife in hand, eyes wild. Ethan fired the shot, sparking off the doorframe as Victor dove aside. "You're out of time, deputy," he snarled. "Vance wants his property back." "Property!" Ethan roared, slamming another round into his rifle. "She's not yours. She's family." Victor sneered, then vanished into the smoke again. Behind Ethan, Clara cried out, "Third pup. She's doing it, God. She's strong." The sound of 3 small whimpers filled the room, fragile but alive. Maya's eyes glowed in the dim light, fierce even as her body shook with exhaustion. She nudged her puppies close, curling protectively around them. Ethan dropped to one knee beside her, his rifle still hot in his hands. "Hold them tight, girl. I'll hold the rest." The attackers pressed again, voices shouting, boots pounding against the side door. Grady and Leo braced their fire steady. The air was thick with smoke, the room alive with chaos. Yet in the middle of it, the tiny cries of new life carried stronger than the noise of war. Victor shouted once more, frustration boiling. "This isn't over, Ward. She'll never be safe." A final burst of gunfire rattled the station, then silence fell as the gang melted back into the storm. Only the crackle of smoke and the sharp wheeze of the heating vents remained. Ethan lowered his rifle, chest heaving. His ears rang. The floor was littered with shell casings, glass, and debris. But they were alive. All of them. He turned to Clara, who sat against the kennel, sweat beading her forehead, 3 tiny puppies bundled in a towel. Maya lay weak but proud, her eyes fixed on Ethan. "You did it," he whispered, voice raw. He reached through the bars, brushing her muzzle. "You saved them. You saved us all." Outside, the storm howled on, carrying away the last traces of gunfire. Inside, in the heart of smoke and ruin, life had taken root. Maya had given birth in fire and bullets, and no force in the world was going to tear her family away again. The night didn't end with the gunfire. The silence that followed was heavier, more dangerous than the bullets. Smoke curled through the police station in pale ribbons, seeping from the shattered door frames and cracked ceiling tiles. The emergency lights flickered red, casting the office in an eerie glow. Ethan Ward stood at the center of it all, chest heaving, rifle slack in his grip. His ears still rang from the firefight, but he could hear what mattered most, the thin cries of 3 newborn puppies. Clara Hayes sat on the floor by the kennel, her hands wrapped around the towel where the pups nestled against Maya's belly. The mother lay stretched on her side, ribs rising and falling with exhausted effort. Yet her eyes were clear, locked on her pups, daring the world to come any closer. Clara stroked her head. She's weak, but she's holding. They all are. Ethan crouched beside them, brushing the soot from his sleeve. "You saved them," he whispered, not sure if he meant Maya Clara or all of them together. The quiet shattered with a hiss. Something rolled under the front desk, clattering against the floor. Ethan's instincts flared. "Down," he shouted, grabbing Clara's arm. The grenade exploded, not with fire, but with thick gray smoke that poured through the station, choking and blinding. Gas again. Clara coughed, pulling her sweater over her nose. Ethan lifted his rifle, but he couldn't see more than a few feet. Shadows flickered in the haze. Boots stomped against tile. Then flames. Fire licked up the wall near the records room, where a Molotov had smashed against the shelves. "They're burning us out!" Sergeant Grady roared, his voice hoarse. He stumbled from the hall, blood staining his bandaged arm from the earlier fight. "Get the evidence, Ward, now!" Ethan sprinted toward his desk, but a figure lunged from the smoke. He ducked the knife blade, catching the sleeve of his jacket. He swung the rifle like a club, smashing the man into the filing cabinet. The attacker groaned and crumpled. Ethan grabbed the evidence drawer, shoving papers and the SD card into his jacket. Behind him, Clara shouted, "We can't move her! She's too weak!" Maya snarled at the smoke teeth flashing, but she couldn't stand with her pups pressed against her. Ethan's heart hammered. He turned back, coughing against the acrid air. The flames spread fast, curling up the walls, devouring papers and wooden furniture. The whole building smelled of burning plastic and scorched steel. "Leo," Ethan called. The young officer staggered in his face, blackened with soot. "Back door's blocked. They've chained it shut," Grady cursed, racking his shotgun. "We're boxed in." The fire roared louder. Sparks rained from the ceiling tiles. The heat pressed in, suffocating. Ethan forced his thoughts to slow to focus. He scanned the room, then spotted the hatch in the floor near the evidence lockers, a storm cellar built decades ago, long forgotten. "Here," he shouted, yanking the metal ring and throwing it open. Cold air rushed up from the dark pit below. "Get Clara and the pups down." Grady nodded, shoving Leo toward the hatch. Clara gathered the tiny bundle against her chest, Maya whining as they moved. Ethan crouched, lifting the shepherd gently. Her body shook, but she didn't resist her eyes, never leaving her pups. He lowered her into the hatch, Clara waiting below to catch her. The pups squeaked, pressed tight against Clara's chest. "Go!" Ethan barked to Leo and Grady. The 2 officers climbed down, weapons ready. Ethan was last. He dropped into the cellar, pulling the hatch closed above him, just as another wave of fire roared across the station. The wooden beams groaned, the heat radiating through the metal cover. In the cramped darkness, their breaths sounded too loud. Clara held the pups close. Maya curled weakly at her side. Ethan pressed a hand to the dog's head, whispering steady words. "It's all right, girl. You've done your part. We'll take it from here." The cellar stank of mildew and damp earth, but it was cooler, safer. They stayed still, the fire raging above. Voices shouted outside, victors among them. "Burn it all, leave nothing behind." Then the crunch of boots faded into the night. Minutes passed like hours. The fire crackled overhead, wood, collapsing, metal twisting. Ethan clenched his fists, knowing years of case files and evidence were turning to ash. Finally, the roar eased. Only the pop of dying embers remained. When Grady deemed it safe, they pushed the hatch open. Night air and snow rushed in a flood of cold that felt like salvation. The station above was ruined. The roof sagged, windows blown out, smoke curling into the storm. Papers turned to ash floated in the wind like black snowflakes. Ethan climbed out first, scanning the street. Empty. The attackers were gone, leaving only destruction behind. Clara emerged next, cradling the pups. Her face was streaked with soot, her hair damp with sweat, but her grip was steady. Maya limped beside her, weak yet unyielding. Leo swore under his breath. They torched everything. Grady spat into the snow, his face grim. Not everything. We're still standing. Ethan pulled the SD card from his jacket. It was warm from the fire, but intact. He closed his fist around it. This is enough. We still have a trail. Clara sank to her knees in the snow, laying the pups against Maya's belly. The mother licked them, her tail twitching weakly. Clara's eyes filled with tears, but her voice was steady. They survived, Ethan. Against all of it, they survived. He crouched beside her, his breath a cloud in the night. He looked at the burned shell of the station, then at Maya and her litter. In that moment, he understood what the fight had cost and what it still demanded. They tried to erase her, Ethan said quietly. Erase all of this. But they failed. He touched the SD card again, a promise building in his chest. And now we bring it all back on them. Snow fell heavier, blanketing the ruin, muffling the last hiss of fire. In the heart of the wreckage, amid smoke and ashes, life huddled close, fragile but undefeated. Maya lifted her head, her eyes glowing through the dark. Even battered, even broken, she radiated defiance. And Ethan Ward knew the war was far from finished. The ruins of the station still smoked when dawn broke over Frost Valley. Snow fell soft and steady, layering the blackened walls in a white shroud. Ethan Ward stood with his hands buried deep in his jacket, watching as fire crews doused the last embers. The building that had once been his stronghold now sagged like a burned-out shell. Years of case files, records, and history all gone in a single night. But not everything had been lost. In the back of the sheriff's truck, bundled in blankets, Maya lay curled around her 3 pups. Her body was weak, her breath shallow, but her eyes burned with the same fierce light that had carried her through fire and bullets. The newborn squirmed against her belly, squeaking as they searched for warmth. Clara Hayes sat beside them, one hand steadying the pups, her other gently stroking Maya's neck. She can't stay here, Clara said quietly, as if afraid the ruins might still listen. They know where she is now, and after last night they'll come harder. Ethan nodded. He had been thinking the same since the flames swallowed the station. Dominic Vance wasn't finished. Victor Hale wasn't finished. If Maya remained in the open, they'd stop at nothing to reclaim her. Sergeant Grady approached his boots, crunching the snow. His bandaged arm hung stiff at his side, but his eyes were steady. We've got a safe place, he said. Thomas Beckett's Rescue Center, out past Miller's Creek, remote fortified. And he owes me a favor. Ethan looked up. Beckett, he knew the name. A retired firefighter who had turned an old barn into a shelter for strays. Some said he lived half wild himself, always with a pack of rescued mutts trailing him through the hills. Clara's eyes flicked between them. If he's willing, it's the best chance we've got. Ethan pulled his collar high against the cold. Then that's where we go. They set out before noon. The convoy was small, Ethan driving with Clara and the dogs, Leo Ramirez trailing, in a second cruiser, Grady riding shotgun to keep watch. The road wound through pines heavy with snow past frozen creeks and ridges where hawks circled in the gray sky. The world looked peaceful, but Ethan kept one hand near his rifle. Peace had become a fragile illusion. Maya lifted her head once during the drive, her ears twitching as if she knew they were leaving danger behind. Clara reached over, adjusting the blanket around her. Almost there, girl, she whispered. You'll be safe soon. The rescue center appeared as the road narrowed into a dirt track. A wide barn stood at the base of a hill, its roof patched but sturdy. Fenced yards stretched beyond, dotted with kennels and lean-to shelters. Smoke curled from a chimney, and the faint sound of barking carried on the wind. Thomas Beckett stepped out onto the porch as they pulled in. He was in his 60s, shoulders broad under a wool coat, his beard silver but thick. A shepherd mix padded beside him, wagging its tail warily. Beckett raised a hand in greeting, though his eyes studied the convoy with suspicion until he recognized Grady. "Paul," he called. "Didn't expect to see you dragging half the valley with you." Grady clapped his shoulder as they met. "Didn't plan on it either, but we need your help." Beckett's eyes shifted to the truck. Ethan opened the back, revealing Maya and her pups. Beckett's gaze softened immediately. He stepped forward, crouching low. "Well, look at you, girl. You've been through the fire, haven't you?" His voice carried the weight of a man who had spent his life speaking to animals more than people. Clara explained quickly Maya's pregnancy, the abuse, the firefight, the fire at the station. Beckett listened without interrupting, his hand resting on Maya's flank. When Clara finished, he rose slowly. "She stays here," he said simply. "You don't have to ask twice. I've got space in the loft. Warm quiet out of sight." Relief washed over Clara's face. Ethan exhaled slowly. "Thank you." Beckett waved it off. "I've seen enough cruelty in this world. No dog of mine is going back to hell." They carried Maya and her pups inside. The loft was warm from the wood stove below, lined with hay bales and thick blankets. Other dogs watched curiously from their kennels, tails wagging, ears pricked, but none barked. It was as if they understood the gravity of the newcomers. Maya settled onto a pile of blankets, her pups pressed close. She licked each one, her eyes heavy with exhaustion, yet alive with purpose. Clara knelt beside her, checking vitals. "She'll need rest, food, time." Beckett handed Ethan a mug of steaming coffee. "You've painted a target on your backs," he said bluntly. "Vance won't take this lying down. He'll send hail again, maybe worse." Ethan sipped the bitterness grounding him. "I know, but we've still got the SD card. Enough to show the feds this isn't just rumor." Grady leaned against the wall. "And we've got this place. They'd be fools to come charging into Beckett's yard." The old man chuckled dryly. "Wouldn't be the first fools I've buried in snow out here." For the first time in days, Ethan allowed a flicker of hope. The shelter felt sturdy, built on loyalty and resilience. Maya was safe for now. But as night fell and the wind howled through the valley, Ethan stepped outside alone. He looked toward the tree line, the shadows shifting under the moonlight. Somewhere out there, Victor Hale was watching, planning, waiting. Ethan tightened his grip on the railing, the cold biting his fingers. The war wasn't over. But tonight, at least, they had a secret shelter, a fragile spark of safety in the storm. And for Maya and her newborn pups, that spark meant everything. The storm rolled down from the ridges like an army. Snow came in sheets slanting sideways, filling the sky until the land disappeared into white. Pines bent beneath the weight, their branches snapping like bones. The wind howled across Frost Valley, rattling the windows of the rescue center where Ethan Ward and his team prepared for the inevitable. Inside the loft was dim and warm, lit by lanterns that swayed with every gust. Maya lay curled on her side, her pups pressed tight to her belly. Clara Hayes sat beside her, whispering soothing words as she checked vitals and rubbed the newborns with a towel. Maya's eyes glowed faintly in the lantern light, fierce even through exhaustion. Every sound outside made her ears twitch. Ethan stood near the window, binoculars pressed to his face. All he saw was snow. Still, his gut twisted. The storm wasn't just weather, it was cover. Dominic Vance had vanished since the fire at the station, but Victor Hale wasn't the type to stay idle. And now Clara's safety weighed heavier on Ethan than any badge or mission. She had stepped too far into the fire. Grady limped in from the barn, shotgun slung over his shoulder. His breath steamed in the cold. "Tracks on the ridge," he said flatly. "Fresh. More than one pair." Ethan lowered the binoculars. "They're here." Clara's head snapped up. "Then we have to move her. Maya and the pups can't stay if no Ethan cut in. They want us to panic. They want us to move. That's the trap." He turned to Grady. "Lock every gate. Check the back fence." Leo Ramirez came running from the side door, snow crusting his jacket. "Deputy, we've got a bigger problem. Clara's car's gone." The words hit like a fist. Clara paled. "Gone, how they took it." Leo said, his voice tight. "Left tracks leading north." Ethan's mind raced. They didn't care about the car. They cared about leverage. A sick realization dawned. They'll use her name, her clinic, her patients. They'll bait us out. As if on cue, the phone in Beckett's office rang. Everyone froze. The sound was shrill in the storm-muted air. Ethan lifted the receiver slowly, pressing it to his ear. Victor's voice slithered through the line, mocking and cold. "Evening, Deputy. Cozy in that barn, are you? Shame if it burned like your little station." Ethan's grip tightened. "You're not getting her back." Victor chuckled. "Not talking about the mutt, talking about your pretty doctor. We've got her. And unless you want her blood on your snow, you'll do exactly as we say." Ethan's eyes snapped to Clara, safe beside Maya. His chest seized. "You're lying." "Check the clinic," Victor purred. "She's gone, but we've left a trail. Bring the dog and the pups to the rail yard north of town. Midnight. No cops, no tricks. You'll get her back breathing. Maybe." The line went dead. Clara's face had drained of color. "Laura," she whispered. Ethan blinked. What Laura Chen, the missing agent? If they're calling with this stunt, it's not me they're holding. It's her. They want you to think otherwise. Clara's hands trembled as she pressed them against the desk. They're using her as bait. The name cut through the room like a blade. Agent Laura Chen vanished months ago in the same shadows they were chasing. Alive, or at least Victor wanted them to believe she was. Grady slammed his fist against the wall. "It's a trap, straight and simple." Ethan's jaw tightened. "And we're walking into it." Beckett, who had been silent until now, crossed his arms. "You'll need the storm to your advantage. They think it blinds you. Use it to blind them instead." Ethan looked at Maya, her head resting protectively over her pups. Leaving her behind gnawed at him. But he had no choice. "She stays," he said firmly. "This fight's ours, not hers." Hours later, under the cover of the storm, they moved. Ethan, Grady, Leo, and Agent Sylvia Grant, who had arrived with reinforcements once the call was traced. Their convoy crawled through the blizzard, lights dimmed. The rail yard loomed ahead, a graveyard of rusted steel and collapsed roofs. Snow blanketed the boxcars, turning them into hulking shadows. The wind screamed through broken windows, carrying the rattle of loose chains. In the center of the yard, a single floodlight cut through the storm, harsh and unnatural. Beneath it stood a figure bound to a post, head-bowed hair plastered with ice. Laura Chen. Ethan's stomach clenched. "She's alive." "Or bait," Grant muttered. They spread out, weapons ready. The snow swirled, muffling every step. Ethan crept closer, his heart pounding. Laura lifted her head weakly. Her face was bruised, lips cracked, but her eyes burned with recognition. Then the storm split with gunfire. Figures rose from behind the boxcars, dark shapes spilling from the shadows. Muzzle flashes lit the night. Bullets tore through snow, sparking off steel. Ambush Grady roared, returning fire. The yard erupted in chaos. Smoke grenades hissed, filling the air with choking haze. The floodlight flickered, plunging everything into blinding shadows. Ethan dropped to the ground, rolling behind a crate. His rifle barked, dropping one attacker. He glanced up, Laura still bound, struggling, as bullets ripped past her. Victor's voice carried over the storm. "Should have brought the dog, Ward. Should have made this easy." Ethan's rage boiled. He sprinted low, sliding across the snow. A bullet grazed his shoulder, heat cutting through the cold. He slammed into the post, slicing through Laura's bonds with his knife. She stumbled into his arms, whispering hoarsely, "It's not just here, they've got more. Across the border." Later, Ethan said, hauling her to cover, "Stay low." Grant's team pushed forward, their fire disciplined and sharp. Grady barked orders, his shotgun booming. Leo covered the flank, young but steady under pressure. The attackers faltered under the storm of bullets, retreating into the blizzard. But Victor didn't run. He emerged from the smoke like a phantom knife, gleaming eyes feral. He locked on Ethan. "You can't save them all." Ethan raised his rifle, but the storm howled, blinding him. Victor slipped back into the snow, vanishing like a shadow swallowed by the night. The gunfire ebbed. Silence returned, broken only by the groan of metal and the rasp of Laura's breathing. She clung to Ethan's arm, her face pale but alive. "He won't stop," she whispered. "Vance won't stop." Ethan stared into the storm where Victor had vanished, his chest heaving. "Neither will I." They pulled back to the convoy, Laura wrapped in blankets, her eyes closing from exhaustion. The snow buried their tracks as fast as they could make them, erasing the violence into white silence. But Ethan knew the storm hadn't covered everything. It had only marked the next battle. And somewhere in the dark, Victor Hale was already planning his return. The storm did not ease. By the next night, it had turned the valley into a world of white silence and restless wind. Snow hammered the earth in relentless waves, piling against barns and fences, burying cars to their roofs, erasing roads so completely that even the locals couldn't tell field from highway. But in the middle of that blizzard, Ethan Ward and his small circle prepared for war. Inside Thomas Beckett's barn, lanterns swayed with each gust of wind. Shadows played across the timber walls as Ethan laid out rifles, sidearms, and spare magazines on a heavy oak table. Grady stood beside him, bandaged arms stiff but steady as he checked every shell in his shotgun. Leo Ramirez cleaned his pistol in silence, his young face drawn tight with exhaustion. Clara Hayes was upstairs in the loft, tending Maya and her pups. Agent Sylvia Grant had returned after the ambush, bringing 2 tactical officers from the federal team. Their presence added weight to the room, but also a reminder this fight would not be clean. Ethan studied the maps Clara had marked: smuggling routes, abandoned mills, rail yards tied to Dominic Vance's network. "Victor's not running anymore," he said. "He's wounded, but he's not hiding. He'll strike while the storm's at its worst, because he knows it cuts us off from help." Grady grunted. "And he knows we're here." Beckett leaned against the wall, his shepherd mix lying at his feet. "You've got high ground here, fences cover in the barns. But when men come hungry and armed, no wall is high enough. Best defense is to meet them head-on before they take root." Grant nodded. "We can't hold this place forever. If we want to end this, we draw Victor and Vance's men into the open tonight. Hit them hard, finish it in one blow." Ethan clenched his jaw, staring at the rifle in his hands. He thought of Maya upstairs, weak, but guarding her pups with the ferocity only a mother could summon. He thought of Laura Chen now resting in Beckett's back room, her voice hoarse from days in captivity, but her information priceless. He thought of Clara, who had risked her own life again and again without hesitation. He lifted his eyes. Then we ended in the storm. The first sign came at midnight. Maya stirred before anyone else heard it. From the loft, a growl rolled down the rafters, sharp and warning. Ethan froze, rifle halfway across the table. Then he heard it, two distant engines muffled by snow crawling up the road from the valley. "Positions," he barked. The barn came alive with motion. Grady and Leo moved to the east windows. Grant and her two agents slipped into the shadows of the hayloft for elevation. Beckett checked the fence gates one last time, then whistled his shepherd mix to heel. Ethan jogged up the ladder to Clara and Maya. Clara crouched low, pressing her hand against Maya's head. The dog's ears twitched, eyes blazing despite her exhaustion. Her pups whimpered softly, bundled close against her. Clara looked at Ethan, her face pale in the lantern light. "She knows. They're coming." Ethan touched Clara's shoulder. "Stay with her. No matter what happens, don't move until I come back." She nodded, her throat tight. "Don't you dare not come back." Ethan gave a grim half-smile, then slid back down the ladder, his boots hitting the dirt floor just as headlights cut through the blizzard. Trucks. 3 of them. Engines snarling, tires spinning in the snow. They skidded to a stop outside, the fence doors flying open. Men poured out, silhouettes with rifle scarves pulled high over their faces. And at the center of them all, Victor Hale coat flapping in the storm, the rattlesnake tattoo visible even in the swirling snow. He shouted over the wind, his voice carrying through the night. "Ward, you've dragged this out long enough. Bring me the dog or I burn this place to the ground with everyone in it." Ethan stepped into the open, rifle raised but steady. Snow stung his face, melted into his collar. He called back, voice iron. "She's not yours. Never was. Tonight it ends Victor one way or the other." Victor laughed, a harsh, jagged sound. He raised his hand. Gunfire erupted. The battle exploded across the whiteout. Muzzle flashes lit the storm bursts of orange against endless snow. Bullets hammered the fences, splintering wood, throwing sparks off metal. Grady fired from the east window, his shotgun booming like thunder. Leo returned fire from the shadows of the barn, his young hand steady despite the chaos. Grant's agents cut down 2 men before they reached the fence, their rifles disciplined and precise. Ethan moved through the blizzard low and fast, firing controlled bursts. He dropped 1 gunman, then another, rolling behind a snow-covered trough as bullets snapped past his head. The storm swallowed sound and sight. 1 step too far, and he vanished into white like prey. Victor stalked forward through the storm, firing as he advanced, his men fanning out in a half-circle. He shouted orders, voice sharp, relentless. "Push them in. Smoke them out." Grenades arced through the air, hissing as they filled the barnyard with choking clouds. Beckett's dogs barked wildly. Teeth bared through the fence. Beckett himself roared a curse, firing into the haze, his old firefighter's strength unshaken. Inside the loft, Maya rose shakily to her feet, despite Clara's pleas. Her hackles bristled, her eyes locked on the chaos below. Every instinct in her screamed to defend, to fight, to tear apart the men who threatened her young. Clara pressed against her, voice shaking. "Stay, please, you can't." But Maya only growled low and steady, the sound of a soldier who had seen too many battles to stand idle. The fight surged toward the barn doors. 2 gunmen crashed through, spraying bullets into the gloom. Leo dropped one with a clean shot. The second lunged forward, but Ethan tackled him into the dirt, their weapons skittering away. They wrestled in the mud and snow until Ethan slammed the man's head against the floor, leaving him unconscious. He snatched up his rifle and spun back to the doorway, firing into the storm. Grady shouted from upstairs. "Ward, they're flanking north side." Ethan cursed, sprinting out into the blizzard. He caught sight of shadows moving along the fence line, trying to circle behind. He fired 1 figure, falling into the snow. Another returned fire bullets, ripping past his ear. Ethan ducked behind a fence post, heart pounding. The storm blinded him, but he felt Victor's presence close, circling like a wolf. Then he heard it. a snarl behind him. Maya. She had slipped from the loft, limping, but furious. Her teeth bared her body, shielding the storm like a black and gold flame. She launched at the nearest gunman, dragging him down in a spray of snow. Clara appeared seconds later, breathless, carrying a pup wrapped in her coat. She wouldn't stay? She cried. I couldn't stop her. Ethan's stomach twisted. Maya, already weak, was burning the last of her strength. He fired to cover her, cutting down another attacker, but Victor's voice rang out from the storm. There she is. Take her. Gunmen surged toward Maya. Ethan and Grady fired desperately, but the blizzard swallowed vision and sound. Then through the chaos, Victor himself appeared, knife-gleaming eyes fixed on Maya. Ethan shouted, voice raw. Victor. It's me. You want? Victor's sneer cut like a blade. No, Ward, it's her. He lunged, but Maya met him head-on. Her teeth snapped inches from his throat, her growl rolling through the storm. Victor slashed the blade, catching her flank, but she didn't yield. She drove him back into the snow, her weight pressing her jaws, snapping with primal fury. Ethan raised his rifle finger, tightening on the trigger, but he couldn't fire. Maya and Victor were locked too close, spinning in a blur of teeth and steel. Grant's agents closed in from the flank, their rifles aimed. Clear shot, Ward, one shouted, but Ethan's voice thundered back. No. She's earned this. The blizzard howled around them, swallowing the world in white. When the storm finally broke, silence hung heavy over the barnyard. Bodies lay half buried in snow. The fence was shattered smoke drifting from burned crates. Grady leaned against a post, bleeding but alive. Leo sat in the snow, his pistol slack in his hands, his chest rising and falling with shock. And in the center, Maya stood over Victor Hale. The knife lay in the snow, blood staining the ground. Victor's eyes stared wide, frozen in fury, his body motionless. Maya's chest heaved, her muzzle streaked with blood, but her gaze was clear. She limped back toward Clara, who dropped to her knees, wrapping her arms around the dog's neck. Tears streaked Clara's face, but her smile trembled with pride. You did it, girl. You did it. Ethan stepped forward, lowering his rifle. The storm eased around him, snow drifting soft again, the world slowly returning from chaos. He looked at Maya, battered, scarred, yet undefeated, and felt the weight of every life saved by her defiance. The storm lifted slowly, as if reluctant to leave the valley it had battered for days. Snow lay heavy on the land, covering broken fences, shattered crates, and the footprints of men who would never return. The air carried the sharp scent of gunpowder, but also something gentler, pine resin, wood smoke, the clean bite of winter morning. Ethan Ward stood in the middle of the barnyard, rifle slung across his back. Boots sunk ankle-deep in the snow. Around him, the wreckage of the night's battle gleamed under the first pale light of dawn. The blizzard had stripped away the noise and rage, leaving behind silence so deep it felt holy. Maya limped at his side, her fur matted with blood along her flank, though her eyes burned with the fire of survival. Every step she took was slow, but proud. Behind her, Clara Hayes carried the 3 pups bundled in a wool blanket, their tiny squeaks muffled against her chest. The sight of them, fragile alive, born in fire and bullets, anchored Ethan's heart more than victory ever could. Grady leaned against a broken fence post, his mustache crusted with frost, his bandaged arm pressed tight against his ribs. Hell of a night, he muttered, voice rasped from smoke. Yet even he cracked a small smile as he watched Maya nose at her pups. Leo Ramirez sat nearby, helmet off, hair plastered to his forehead with sweat. His hands trembled slightly as he cleaned his pistol, but his eyes shone with something new. The hard clarity of a man who had faced death and chosen to stand. Agent Sylvia Grant walked through the yard with her 2 tactical officers surveying the fallen. Her face was stern, but there was respect in her gaze as she met Ethan's eyes. "It's over here," she said quietly. Victor Hale's gone, his men scattered. We'll mop up what's left. Ethan shook his head. It's not over. Vance is still out there. Grant's lips tightened, but she didn't argue. Instead, she turned toward the barn, where Thomas Beckett had lit a fire in the old stove. Smoke curled from the chimney, warm and steady. Inside, Laura Chen sat propped against a pile of blankets, her face pale but alive. She had survived captivity storms and bullets. Now her voice, hoarse but firm, carried a warning. Vance will run south. He'll try to slip across the border, take the rest of the dogs with him. We need to move fast. Ethan crouched beside her. You've done enough. Rest. Heal. We'll carry it from here. Laura's eyes softened, but they still held the steel of an agent who had given everything. Just make it mean something. Later that morning, Clara and Ethan sat in the loft, watching the sunlight filter through gaps in the barn boards. Maya lay curled around her pups, their small bodies pressed tight against her warmth. Her eyes drifted closed, but each time the wind rattled the walls, she stirred, checking her young, never letting down her guard. Clara touched Ethan's arm, her voice gentle. She'll heal. It'll take time, but she's stronger than any of us. Ethan watched the pups squirm their coats, already showing hints of the same golden black as their mothers. Hope, he thought. That's what they looked like. Not trophies of survival, but promises of something better. You stayed when you didn't have to, he said quietly, glancing at Clara. More than once. Why? She smiled faintly, brushing a strand of hair from her soot-streaked cheek. Because she needed someone. And maybe, so did you. For the first time in weeks, Ethan allowed himself a real breath. The war wasn't finished. Vance still waited like a shadow beyond the horizon. But here in the warmth of the barn, life had endured. That mattered. By noon, the valley stirred with signs of rebuilding. Locals who had heard the gunfire came trudging through the snow, carrying tools, blankets, food. They offered quiet words, nods, and the kind of support that needed no explanation. Frost Valley was small, but it was theirs, and they would not let it break. Grady organized the volunteers with his gravelly bark, assigning patrols to guard the roads. Leo moved among the townsfolk, his youthful nerves replaced by steady resolve. Beckett opened every pen and kennel, letting his dogs roam the yard, their playful barks chasing away the last echoes of violence. For Ethan, the sight was humbling. This wasn't about badges or ranks anymore. It was about people, ordinary people, choosing to stand against cruelty. He walked back to the loft where Maya raised her head at his approach. He crouched beside her, stroking her muzzle. "You've given enough blood," he whispered. "From here on, you get peace." Maya blinked slowly, her breath warm against his hand. Her pups wriggled, squeaking, one of them pressing a tiny paw against his thumb. Ethan smiled, rough and tired, but honest. That night the storm finally broke. Stars glittered sharp and bright above the valley, their light reflecting off endless fields of snow. A quiet settled over the land, deep and clean. Ethan stood outside the barn, the cold biting his cheeks. Clara joined him, wrapping her coat tighter. For a moment they didn't speak, just listened to the stillness. Then Clara said softly, "You know this isn't the end." "I know," Ethan admitted. His eyes followed the horizon where dark forests hid the path south. "But it feels like a beginning." She leaned closer, her shoulder brushing his. "A dawn," she murmured. Ethan nodded. Behind them, the barn glowed warm, holding within it the mother who had fought through fire, the pups who symbolized survival, the people who had chosen loyalty over fear. The storm had taken much, but it had not broken them. Out of smoke and blood, something new had risen, fragile, yes, but stronger than any storm. As the first pale streaks of sunrise touched the mountains, Ethan whispered words only the wind carried: hope.